Hey, everybody, welcome back to For Starters. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about resilience. 2023 was a really challenging year for a lot of people in the startup economy and in venture capital, to be sure. We've talked about that quite a bit on this channel. And one of the things that's come up a lot recently is what is resilience? How were the companies that made it through last year able to do so? What are some of the traits that go into it? And instead of going through a whole treatise on what resilience means, because there's a lot that goes into it, right? Access to capital and networks, life experience and experience building companies, plain good luck, strong, resilient team and culture. There's lots that does go into resilience, but I was thinking about one particular thing that is an idea that has been in my head for many, many years. And I will distill it for you in the phrase, the difference between check and checkmate. This may seem like a little weird way to get into this, but there's a book by Sebastian Junger called The Perfect Storm. It was turned into a movie that many of you may have seen. And there's a moment in the movie and the book where the sword fishing boat that's out there that's not going to make it, that is climbing up the last wave, and it is the end. There's a moment in the book where Sebastian Junger goes through all the different decisions that led that boat to be on that wave at that moment where there was no moves left. And it was, the ice machine had failed. They could have made it to port 2 weeks before. They mightn't have gone out so late in the season, but at the point at which they were at, there were no decisions left. And I remember as a kid reading this book being very moved by that, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, when you're in the middle of a difficult situation, it is sometimes really hard to tell when you're facing a setback, but you still have moves left, and when in fact, there's no more reasonable things you can do. And that to me is the difference between check and checkmate. If you happen to be a chess player, in a chess match, a competitive one, you might be in check a bunch of times. And in check, the difference between check and checkmate, of course, is you have moves left. And you can continue to try and get out of check and turn the game around and eventually win. In crisis situations, there are oftentimes setbacks. I am fond of saying that a deal or a company might die 1,000 times between the beginning of it and the end of it, even if the end is very successful. The really critical part of resilience is to understand when there's no more reasonable moves left versus when you happen to be in check. It's a setback, it's a tough situation, but you have moves and you can work your way out of it. And I think that's one of the really critical things about being an entrepreneur, being an investor, is understanding the difference. Because in fact, along the road, there are going to be those setbacks that feel like they're the end. And people around you may tell you, like, why are you still fighting for this? Doesn't it seem too hard? This thing has gone sideways a bunch of times. And the guidance that I would give is think to yourself, am I out of moves here? Is there nothing left that I can do? And again, you want to apply a criteria of reason to that, right? At anything reasonable that I can do. But if the answer is yes, we're not out of moves, then what you're facing is a setback. You can get around it or through it. And that is the big difference. So until checkmate, where there really isn't anything else to do, then there's still something left. And that is what differentiated so many successful, resilient stories from last year to those companies and founders that didn't make it. So the question is, how do you apply this every day? And the good news is, I think there's a lot more checks than checkmates. If at the end of the day, you still have moves left, then there's things you can do. And every great entrepreneurship story has so many, all the books you read, all the documentaries you might see have so many stories of the times where the founder and the company were in check. So again, the good news is most of the time you still have moves. So if you can keep calm, think about it from that perspective, and then make that next move, most of the time it works out okay.